What's up guys? Today's video is actually a follow-up to a video I posted a few weeks ago in which I wrote a song right in front of the camera and just kind of demonstrated my songwriting process. And I said I was going to do a follow-up to that video where I went in and actually mixed the tune, and that's what this video is. Today we're going to pull that song into the session and go through kind of the basic mix setup that I use, how I like to set up the session, how I like to organize things, some basic EQ and compression tips, and just general ways to have a healthy mix. So let's head over to the computer and mix some tunes. Alright guys, so here we are in the session, and this is how I like to organize my sessions. I'm a big fan of color coding the tracks. Whenever I see guys that mix and they don't color code their tracks, it always confuses me, like, it looks ugly. And basically I do drums running from cymbals down through the rest of the shells, some guitars I keep in red, my clean guitars I put in this kind of teal, and then the bass. Then also at the bottom I have the two reverbs that we'll use. In this case, the R verb, the room verb, and that's set at a very low time, 0.62 seconds. And this is going to be mainly for the drums, because we are using the sampled drums from GarageBand. We're going to want to give them some space to make them sound natural, and then a larger modulated hall, which we'll mess around with the clean guitars. So first thing I like to do is just settle in and start mixing bottom up, essentially. So starting with drums, like the kick drum, and then moving up to the bass. Kind of tweaking stuff, just doing some basic EQing to get things sounding how we like them. So let's take a look at the kick. Right off the bat, it sounds a little too ticky for what I'm looking for. So what I'm going to do is remove some of that very high-end frequency of that kick, like so. That's a little better. I kind of like the more mid-rangey click for this idiom. If we were doing something proggy, I'd like the kind of high-frequency stuff. Nice, and then I'm going to put a little peak in it so I can get kind of the kick fundamental in there. I'm going to put a little peak in now so I can get a little of the kick fundamental. And it's always a good idea to be careful with additive EQ, because EQs, you know, when you do a boost, you're adding more frequencies. And I find that some EQs sound worse than others. For instance, I don't like the Pro Tools EQ for boosting because I don't like the frequencies it adds, but I like it for cutting. Cool, I like that. Alright, then as always, going through and gain staging the plugins. Alright, so now I'm going to jump over and compress this a little bit just to start out. We're going to use the C1 compressor. I also, again, just like how this one sounds. And for kicks, I don't know, I usually start out with something around 2.5, but with like kind of a longish attack time, maybe something like 22. Okay, I'm kind of liking that sound in there. Shooting for, you know, kind of 5 to 6 decibels of gain reduction. Then I also like to always adjust makeup faders on these compressors so the stuff is hitting relatively hot. So it makes mixing easier. You can kind of keep the faders very uniform. Okay, I'm going to move on to the snare drum now. And I'm only doing this to get kind of like rough levels and correct some of the errors I hear in the sound, or fix sounds how I want. I wouldn't do final EQing in a vacuum. You want to listen to the whole mix for that. Just for getting stuff set and sounding good, this is a good strategy. Alright, I'm kind of liking the pongy nature of this. So I'm going to go in and give it a little oomph. Alright. By oomph, I mean kind of 200 hertz push. There, you hear it? That's nice. And then I'm going to really accentuate the kind of pong. Pong, pong. Honestly, I could probably compress to get that sound I want. Instead, I'm just going to cut a little of the thickness around here. Alright, so real quick, what I like to do with snares is usually do kind of 2 rounds of compression. The first, I'll usually just use a basic compressor like this with a ratio around here. Again, kind of this 2 to 3 area, but with a pretty short attack, usually something like, 15 milliseconds or so. And then here, we're going to only take off like a couple decibels because we're going to follow it up with another compressor. Something like that. And then follow it up with the Bomb Factory 76. And with kick drums and snare drums, if I feel like I'm not getting enough to attack or like crack in them, I'll sometimes use JSD clip to get the extra little push. Alright, that's sounding good. Alright, we're going to go down and take a look at the tom now. Let's see. Usually for toms, I use some pretty drastic EQ processing, like with boosting, to get the kind of booming sound without samples. But in this case, that's usually for a acoustic drum. But in this case, those are getting there. Okay. Probably don't want to take so much out of that mid-range. Alright, that's getting kind of to where I'm thinking. Let's try that RE6 EQ. I like that kind of bassy tom. Cool. I can work with that. And then I'm just going to compress a bit. With this Pro Tools compressor, I don't much like how it sounds once you kind of start to hit below -12 dB. However, in the kind of 0 to -7 range, I think it sounds pretty good. Alright, now I'm going to do some parallel compression on the drums with a bus. So let's go ahead and get that set up. Color code, my guy. And then we'll get some sends going here. For these, we'll just use 5 and 6. Alright, make sure that stereo send is panned out properly. And then also, very important here, make sure that you pan the sends for your bus. Sorry, that was on the other screen, but because sometimes I would do this and I'd do the parallel compression and I'd say, why does it sound narrow? And it was because I wasn't panning the bus signal. So it was kind of squashing things together. Okay. And those are already sounding a little more aggressive, kind of where I want them. So let's get everything going with the bus. Oh, real quick also, we're going to set up the master bus. And usually this is the first thing I do when I crack open a mix. And what this will usually consist of is jumping down here and setting this clean limit preset. This is something that a friend of mine showed me a while back, and for me it works pretty well. I use that, and then I go right below it and follow it up with the maximizer. In this case, maxim. And set this for basically -0.1 and -0.1. So the goal of this thing is just to keep your master bus from clipping out. Sometimes when I mix, I like to have this hitting like -2 dB, but this really is just there to kind of curve off the very peaks of the mix before it hits the master channel. And you shouldn't be, hitting this very hard. It's basically just there to prevent a clip. Okay, so getting back to our drum bus. We're going to jump down here on the drum bus and use a fantastic free compressor that I've covered in another video, the Acoustic Atan. It's got a very snappy sound to it. Set it to a decent ratio with a pretty short attack and a decent length release. And let it go to work. Sick. Alright, and then the final step on the drum bus is the fantastic Joey Sturgis clip. Sick. Then over here on the cymbals, real quick, before we jump down and do some other stuff, what I'm going to do, because these are nice GarageBand samples, you don't have to take out a lot of the low-end kind of crap in the overhead that would normally be in a drum mix, but I sometimes like to freshen these guys up a bit. Then kind of pull out that grating frequency that can hurt a little bit on the ears.
Then after that, I just run these guys through the 1176 and take off just a little bit of, just kind of clip the peaks and kind of squish them down, get a really level sound with the overhead. All right, sweet. So now real quickly, I'm going to pull up our mix window and I'll get a kind of a rough mix for the drums. And basically my goal with this here is getting these drums to kind of hit here on the master fader. And again, the bottom down method can be used. Also, I'm going to jump over on this snare and turn it down quickly because we don't want to be clipping our faders. Always want to gain stage properly so you don't clip plugins or clip faders. And see, right there, we got a little bit of clipping, so we're going to get rid of that. This is important to making sure the signal flow is clean. Anywhere you see the clips, sometimes just duck it a little bit. And then obviously go through and make your corrections later, but just because I'm kind of moving quick, that's just kind of the point I want to get across. Make sure you're not clipping your plugins or your faders, and then once you got all that stuff out of the way, you can tweak and mix. Cool. All right, so I'm liking that as a basic drum level. So what I'm going to do is grab all these guys and add them to the drum bus. Or actually sorry, my bad. I'm going to add them to a group. And for things like drums, this is a fantastic thing to do. It's going to really streamline your workflow because once you kind of do a little focus group session with the drums and you like how they sound, you can lock them into a group, call those drums right here, and then you move one fader and you move one fader in the group and they all move. And then you can always just break them out of the group to make further adjustments. All right, so let's jump down and take a look at our bass. So right now I think it's a little ganky. Kind of pew, 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 pew. It's a little too much for me. So let's try to find where all that high frequency attack is and cut a little of it. Ooh, but see? I like to do a little boost sometimes in the 1K area with bass. Alright, so that sounded pretty cool. Next thing I'm going to do is check what our kick fundamental was and notch a little bit of that out of the bass. So let's see, our kick fundamental was around 105. Okay. In that case, I might take the bass actually and put it a little below. So that would be taking the 105, or 105 hertz. So let's see, like around here. Nice narrow band. And dipping it a little bit. But then jumping in right below it, maybe adding a little spike of, let's see. Ooh, kind of in there. I'm digging that for sure. And then finally with bass, I definitely like to smash it with the BF76. And then followed up sometimes with a low JST clip. Gives it a really full sound. And see, this is now where I would go back and I think I want a little more bite out of those drums. There we go. Bust them out of the group real quick. I'm going to do a little EQ on these guitars and then no compression because there's so much compression already occurring with these high gain tones. There's no real need to squish them. And if I do compress, it'll be extremely light. So let's jump in there on the channel strip and go ahead and do both of those things. Get the kind of woofy sounds out of there. Do a little boost down there because I kind of like the really low-endy tone you get with these guys. And there's that kind of 5K, 4 to 5K frequency that can get a little nasty. You hear that? Gross. Alright, so I'm digging that. So now we're going to jump over here in the compressor, and I will usually do a ratio like 1.3 with a pretty slow attack, but make sure it's basically taking nothing off the top, and then just set the gain and move on. We'll put that on our second guitar, and that is already sounding killer. So let's get this leveled in with the other stuff. Also, as you can see, I've had to set these guys with slightly different levels because they are two different presets. Now that I dig that, we're going to group them again and level everything together. So this will be rhythm, git. Cool, cool, cool. Alright, now let's listen to the whole mix and bring in our guitars. Alright, that is sounding good. Now let's jump over to this final section and we'll be almost done with this. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do in this section, now that I have the guitars a little compressed, I'm not going to do any EQ just for the demo, but I'm going to do some automation here on the bass. Because we're going to need to drop some of the dynamics. Nice. Alright, so now we're going to go down here and actually switch these guys around and make sure that we're running our hall reverb. Whoa! Little much there. Alright, I think I kind of like this drawn out one here on the left with the chords a little better with more reverb. Oh, that's nice. Alright, now that we got that pretty much set, let's jump over to these analog drums. In this case, it's just kind of one stereo track with the kit on it. And we can get this actually sounding pretty cool by going over here and busting to that hall verb that we set up, or that room verb, my bad. Cool. Alright. Now you can see that peeking through a little more. Next thing we're going to do is jump over to our EQ. This is an important thing you have to do with single track drums. Get used to going through with an EQ and highlighting the different frequencies of the kit. You know, this is something that you're going to do if you're recording mics with one drums, which a lot of people start out doing. Sounding good, but what might even sound cooler is if we actually did a little bit of a saturation on these guys. Let's just give it a shot, see if we like it. Alright, now hearing that, I do actually like it a lot. However, I think I'm going to go over here and switch this out for the BF76 again. I thought that other compressor was a little sharp. And that's why it's good to have multiple compressors on hand. Sometimes just the character of them won't fit what you want. Nice. I really like the way that saturation knob kind of made the drums sound a little beefier. Alright, so now let's bring up the faders and start listening to the song and just do a basic leveling. checking to make sure we're not hitting this too hard. And as you can see, we aren't. Nice. Going into that clean section. Probably bring these down. But as you can see, by using the saturation and the reverb, we really made that just basic drum machine sound very alive. All right, here we go. All right, that sounds really good. I think I'm going to dip the level of these clean guitars a little bit. We're going to group them and just do, let's see, clean, and then dip these. And then, honestly, after that, I think we might be good. Like I said earlier in the video, what I just did was a pretty cursory mix down. I was playing it pretty fast and loose with the plugins, and if this was a track for a client or something I would put on an album, I'd obviously be more in-depth. However, what I wanted to show you guys was how you can take a bunch of multi-tracks, set them into your session, level them, and get basic plugin settings. And in addition to doing that, make sure things are gain staged properly, not clipping faders or plugins, and you have a healthy level running into the master bus. Because some of the loudness and kind of aggression you get from your mix comes from filling up that master fader. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed that video. If you got any comments or stuff you'd like to let me know or things you want to point out and, some tips for me, leave them in the comments box. And until next time, peace.